Okay, welcome everyone to this IES webinar, Sustainable Remediation Forum UK or SURF UK, a whistle-stop tour of its resources. Today we are delighted to be joined by Nicola Harries. Nicola is a chartered geologist and chartered scientist and has over 25 years experience within the environmental industry. She is a project director at Clare and coordinates the National Brownfield Forum, the National Quality Mark Scheme for Land Contamination Management Steering Group, the Sustainable Remediation Forum UK and SURF International. In this webinar, Nicola will provide a summary of SURF UK's resources, how to access them, and when they will be useful. As always, there will be the chance for questions at the end of the presentation, so please do submit these in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen at any point during the presentation. I will then ask these on your behalf later on. This presentation is also being recorded and will be made available on the IES YouTube channel. Thank you very much for logging in. It's great to see you all here. Nicola, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone, and good afternoon or good morning wherever you are in the world. I'm going to talk to you about SURF UK, give you a very quick whistle-stop tour of its key resources. I obviously can't go into the resources in great detail, but hopefully at the end of this webinar you will know how to access them and give you a sort of nugget of what the different resources are and how you can use them. So I'm going to give you a very quick background because I know people, members of the institution have got very broad backgrounds. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction of what sustainable remediation is. And then I'm going to talk to you about the main resources that we have available. I'm going to go through them systematically, and you will see that we've got the animation and a very useful paper as well. But the key part that everything links back to is the framework, which was actually published back in 2010. And since 2010, we've actually added to the resources to help those who want to understand and use the resources. So hopefully you will see the tools and the practices will be useful to you. So what is sustainable development and sustainable remediation, and how are they interlinked? So just giving you a bit of evolution about contaminated site management, we think this is a useful sort of graph showing how things have changed over the years. So back in the 1960s, obviously contamination, soil and groundwater was discarded as waste. Then sort of in the 1990s, we started introducing the ideas of risk-based decision making, and obviously CLR 11 from the Contaminated Land Report was all about risk-based decision making. And there were sort of words about sustainable and sustainable principles actually mentioned in that CLR 11, which has obviously now been replaced by LCRM, the Land Condition Risk Management web pages. So as you see, back in the 60s, then you move to the 1990s about risk-based, and then gradually in the 90s it was very intensive treatments. You were digging up, you were treating soil and groundwater, but sometimes to the nth degree, and people saying this can't be a good use for the environment. The impacting of the environment for some of the remediation technologies, the impact on the communities, because technologies were continuing to be run. And then people said, well, surely we should be balancing whether it's actually a cost-effective and economic side to things, the social side, thinking about communities, and the environment as well. So this is where sustainable risk management started to be thought about. So sustainable development goes back to the Brundtland report back in 1987. This is where the principles of development meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. And everything from there has been built off. So it all goes back to the Brundtland report in 87. So sustainable remediation is the application of the principles of sustainable development to soil and groundwater remediation decisions, the decisions you are making when you're carrying out remediation, but considering it in a sustainable way. And this is now referenced, as I mentioned, in LCRM, the new Land Condition Risk Management. So it's very important its strong principles are now signposted on LCRM and to the Surf UK resources. So, as I mentioned in previous slide, is all remediation beneficial? No, because remediation seeks to reduce risks associated with soil and groundwater contamination, but it can also use a lot of energy, it can create waste, it can introduce impacts on health and safety. So the point about remediation not always being sustainable. So the key is to make sure it's sustainable remediation, making sure you are looking at the benefits, but also understanding the negative impacts and balancing those between the social side, the economic sides, and the environmental parts. So I just thought that was an important aspect to focus on. So what is Surf UK? For those of you who aren't familiar, we've been established now since 2007. It is the United Kingdom Sustainable Remediation Forum, and it was set up to advance the development of sustainable remediation. It's a collaboration between regulators, industry, academics and consultants, and Clare coordinates this as a project within Clare. And we've published a lot of free resources, and hopefully I will now share a number of these resources and help you understand what you can use them for. So the resources, we've got lots of information to set the scenes for you, but also we have some tools as well. So I will be going through all of these for you. So as I mentioned, I know a number of you come from lots of different backgrounds. There are a lot of land contamination, land quality professionals, but those of you who aren't that, you may actually want to just know the main principles. So I will share some of those that you may just want to access and then gradually build your knowledge up. So all of these resources are on the Clare website. There's the website www.clare.co.uk/surfuk. Everything is on that page and can be accessed. So the animation that we produced about 3 years ago now, this explains the main principles of sustainable remediation. It's only 3 minutes long, and it's a really good tool if you are going to explain to maybe a client or somebody who knows the principles of sustainability but wants to know how it can apply to remediation. So it's a well worth just visiting that to just get a very basic understanding of the main principles. And the beauty is it's been translated into 17 different languages. So there are subtitles. So if you have clients, if you have colleagues from different countries who want to know about the principles, you can actually signpost them to this. And obviously, if they don't speak English, there are subtitles for this. So I would actively encourage you to visit that as a starting point. So in addition, there is a paper called Debunking the Myths about Sustainable Remediation. Now, this was actually, it's not a fixed Surf UK deliverable, but it was actually published or prepared by Surf UK and the former chair of Surf UK called Jonathan Smith, who works for Shell. And the reason we prepared this, and it's an open access paper, is because when sustainable remediation was being thought about or was being discussed initially in sort of 2012, 15, 17, there's been a lot of people a bit sort of, well, it's only about trying to save money. So we say, no, it's not about saving money, it's making better decisions. Well, people keep talking about green remediation. Well, that's the same as sustainable remediation. So, and we're saying, no, it's not, and the differences are X. So this paper is a really good way of just, you will have heard a lot of these myths, and it just sets the actual context and why those myths are not true, and how you can then counteract those comments with the truth. So I'd actively encourage you to read this paper, because it's not very long, and it's nice and succinct and clearly setting out how things have developed and the key messages. So as I mentioned, it's a freely available open source. You will be able to access this from the CLARE website as well, but here is the direct access if you want to get it. So everything has been developed from the framework. So when Surf UK was first set up in 2007, the first thing we did was actually develop a framework. But from that, we realized that people needed more support. So from here, all the other resources have been developed from the framework. So 2010, this was developed. And the first thing we had to do was actually define what sustainable remediation is. So Surf UK defined the practice of demonstrating in terms of environmental, economic and social indicators that the benefit of undertaking remediation is greater than its impact, and the optimum remediation solution selected is through a balanced decision-making process. Now, if you keep that in mind, all the resources that have now flow from this all come back to this. So you will understand the tools that we've developed are all about demonstrating a balance between economic, environmental and social, and the decision-making process. So everything comes back to this. So that's the key message. So the framework has 6 key principles, and these key principles are all about what you have to meet. So you have to protect human health and the environment, your safe working practices, you've got to be consistent and clear in your decision making, record keeping needs to be transparent, you have good governance and stakeholder involvement, and sound science. So that those key principles again are fundamental, and these are all referenced also in the animation. So Surf UK, very simple. We try to keep it as simple as possible. There's 2 stages to it. You've got a stage A and a stage B. Stage A is when you're planning your project, you will get the greatest impact on sustainable benefits in a stage A than a stage B. Stage A, when you're planning your project, you may have a big housing development, for example, that has some contamination at one point. You would try, if you've got housing with gardens, you would avoid the most contaminated bit because you wouldn't have to dig that up if you avoided that area. You're trying to be, you're trying to make some really strong decisions on your sites. When you come to a stage B, that is where the decision have already been made. You are now selecting your remedial options. So you won't be able to have such a great sustainable principles. You won't have the most decisions you'll be able to make because the decision has already been made to what option you're going to be doing. So for example, if you were going to do a soil vapor extraction system, for example, you can add some sustainable benefits by maybe doing some photovoltaic system for the electricity or using biodiesel or those sort of things, not letting your machines idle unnecessarily, but you won't be able to make as greater impact sustainability wise as a stage A, because that's your project planning, that's your master planning, that side of things. But it's a very simple setting what a framework is. It's a tiered approach, so we always said you want to try and be qualitative, as simple as possible, but you need to fix your objectives of the work you're going to be undertaking, the stakeholders you're going to involve, the boundaries you're going to set, indicators, options. I'm just reading the box at your bottom left. Those are the key things you need to set when you're carrying out a sustainability appraisal. Now, this will be again repeated through lots of the resources, but it just shows you what we're saying is within the framework, it's very important to keep things as simple as possible. A qualitative assessment, if you can't make the decisions through a qualitative assessment, you would then go to a semi-quantitative and then quantitative but you try to make it as simple as possible, and the record keeping and everything is following through. So the key factors when you're carrying out an appraisal, we mentioned these in that bottom left box. The objectives, you need to set your objectives for the appraisal, which stakeholders you're going to involve, what boundaries you're going to set, what indicators are relevant to your project, the options you may have to, you're going to decide on in the end when you're carrying out your sustainability appraisal, and the techniques you're going to use, whether it's going to be qualitative, semi-quantitative or quantitative, and then carrying out a sensitivity analysis. And what's been great from the SURF UK framework is now it's globally recognised and it's signposted to and has been strongly referenced within the ISO standard. So that has made it a very strong document, and now other countries have actually copied the document within their own countries, and there are SURFs around the world now. So the second resource I wanted to share with you, this was only published last July, and this was a refresh from 2014, where we published an indicator guidance to support the framework. So in the original framework in 2010, it talked about different indicators, headline indicators that you could use when you were carrying out a sustainability assessment. But this needed to be refreshed because lots more information had become available, and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals came out, so we thought it would be a good way of signposting the indicators to the UN SDGs. So the new document, the indicator guidance document, actually got refreshed but into two documents, and this was as a result of a public consultation that we went out to industry and asked for their feedback on the indicator guidance, and people said it's good, the indicators are fine, but we really want to know how you do an assessment, a bit more information of how to carry out the assessment. So what we did was we split it into SR1 and SR2. Now, SR1 is the role of sustainability assessment. It's a much more how do you do process. So it explains to you about carrying out an assessment, and it gives you sort of pointers of what to follow. And SR2 is much more about the indicators. So it goes into a much more detail about the rationale of the 15 indicators. We've got 15, we've got 5 economic, 5 social and 5 environmental headline indicators. So it talks to you about a checklist. It shows you what these indicators are. It gives you the key points under each of the indicators. What do they actually mean? Because it doesn't actually tell you. I was just going to go back to the indicators. It doesn't actually show you what they mean. So what we've done is we've gone into much more detail in those indicators. And within this process, it shows you what you need to follow. So in SR1 and SR2, how to actually carry out a sustainability assessment. So again, preparing yourself, what are you trying to do? What are your principles you're trying to cover? What are your defining your objectives and your boundaries and the scope of the assessment? Which indicators are you going to select are appropriate for your project? So it talks you through the process. It also encourages a much wider way of talking to stakeholders as well. So you're trying to make sure that your sustainability assessment is much more robust. Again, we talk about the principles of sustainable remediation, making sure things are transparent, and so you can make sure that you, when you sit down or talk to your stakeholders, whether that's your colleagues, whether it's your local community, it helps you frame the work. This is all detailed in SR1 and SR2. So the guidance gives you a way of being much more prescriptive. It shows you how to do things. It shows you how to benchmark your sustainability approach. It also makes you understand, or helps you understand, and helps you explain things to others. So when I mentioned about the headlines, these are the different headline indicators. So the 5 environmental, economic and social, and these have been consistent all the way through since we published back in 2014. So environmental 1 is all about emissions to air, but then you may say, well, what does that actually mean? What does that cover? And again, for soil and ground conditions, we've tried to give titles, but then what we've done is we've given, you can't see the detail here, but in the annex to SR2, it goes through the details of against here, say environmental 1, they've got different sheets for each of the headline indicators. It talks about emissions to air, and this will tell you and give you some possible individual indicators that you could be measuring. Again, it's project specific, so it's not saying you have to use these. What it's using is an aid memoir for you to say, oh yes, that's applicable to my project, or no, that's definitely not applicable to my project, and you can give a reason why it's not applicable. Again, it's all about transparency and your decision-making process. What these do, the annexes, again, this is in an Excel spreadsheet, so you can go through and you can look and in much more detail, zoom in. These are just the sheets for you to see, but there is an Excel spreadsheet, so you can zoom in and get much more detail. So again, these each indicator, headline indicator, references against other indicators, so you can see that it references to the social side indicators as well. But as I mentioned, it also links to the SDGs, and that's very important for people, for corporate clients, for example, who want to say, well, how are we demonstrating that we are meeting the UN SDGs for different things? So again, you can see that, and these have been mapped, and the words have been selected for the relevant SDGs. So as I mentioned, there's different sheets for all the environmental, social and economic. So they're split into different sections, and you have lots and lots of detail there to go and review. So when you're selecting your indicators and your criteria, if you're carrying out a sustainability assessment, it helps you consider which indicators are relevant to your site or to your project. It helps you then document why, the rationale that you're actually using those indicators, and obviously then you finalize and look at which ones are more appropriate. And when you're comparing different remediation technologies, you can then say, oh, that one's more appropriate to that technology, it's less appropriate to that technology for the different indicators. So that's how the SR1 and SR2. As I mentioned, each of the spreadsheets are in a lot of detail. So you have a possible 73 criteria that you could look at. Again, you will see very quickly which ones are appropriate for you and which ones are less appropriate. But it's important that they've now been brought up to date and cross-referenced to the UN SDGs. So to help you with SR1 and SR2, because it's a document you may want to read, but to actually help you map against that and to record your information, last month we published a Tier 1 sustainability assessment spreadsheet, so you can actually record your decision making. So this was an Excel spreadsheet that was originally published in 2014 by URS, now AECOM, and AECOM have worked with SURF UK and updated the spreadsheet. So now you can access it again from the CLARE website, and it provides a standardized recording process for completing a Tier 1 qualitative sustainable remediation assessment in line with the updated guidance. So it's all tied together, so you can now, in a transparent way, you can actually identify what project you're working on, and you can record which indicators you think are appropriate to your project when you're carrying out a qualitative assessment. Most sustainable remediation appraisals are qualitative, so this is a very useful tool for you. As I mentioned, if you're recording it using a fixed standard tool, you're adding transparency for recording purposes. And the really nice thing is it also helps you meet the LCRM on their website now, the Land Condition Risk Management. It talks about carrying out a sustainability appraisal, and this will help you do that. So this is just a snapshot. I can't show you it in detail, in working detail, but I would actively encourage you to go and look at it. And it's a very simple tool. You can set your project, the details of your project, which stakeholders you're involving, the constraints you're working between, what are your objectives, your boundaries, your methodology of approach, what uncertainties can you not decide on, and then it takes you back to the indicators as well, and it helps you define your methodology and approach. So I'd actively encourage you to go and have a play with this. And you can, the nice thing is with this tool is you can print the different sheets out. So if you wanted to show a client why you're opting for this option because it's the most sustainable, you can actually show in a transparent way. The next resource I wanted to share with you, this hasn't quite been published yet, so you're getting an early view of this. This is the Sustainable Management Practices for Management of Land Contamination. So where we talk about the Tier 1 assessment, this is the next simple tool that you could use to help you in your business within your companies. So these are simple processes and procedures. So the original document was published in 2014, and because of the Land Condition Risk Management web page, we have now looked to update this in line with that document. So this is coming out in the summer of this year. So you can still access the SMP reports. It's still valid, but it's not been brought up in line with LCRM. But the process of sustainable management practices are simple processes to encourage sustainable thinking. So where people say, well, we can't do this because we do X, these are some of the processes that you may not have ever thought are sustainable or could be mapped against these SURF UK indicators. And this helps you maybe change your thought process. So there's nothing new, nothing majorly innovative here, but what we're trying to do is change behaviors or actions to help you as those who are in businesses to change some of your processes and procedures and say, the reason we're doing this is actually this is helping us to be more sustainable as a business, and you've never really necessarily thought about this as a sustainable principle. So they're mapped against the SURF UK indicator categories. They are very practical, everyday processes. They're inexpensive and demonstrate a clear benefit for a project. What, as I mentioned earlier, we have mapped these against a new, or we will be, it's in review process at the moment. We are mapping these against the different processes within the LCRM project activity stages. So we've looked at sustainable management practices within procurement, land use management, risk assessment. So under site investigation, if you're a site investigation company, you may say, well, we can't be very sustainable because of the work we carry out. There's indicators here that can help you. Options appraisal, remediation strategy, remediation construction, operation and verification, long-term monitoring. So hopefully these are processes and procedures, and they're not definitive. These are just us as a group, a steering group, to come up with some ideas. So for example, don't allow your plant and equipment to run idly on site. Very simple, easy to implement, and you probably do this if you are a remediation contractor and you're in your special air zone. You may say, well, actually we do that anyway. That's great, but you could actually record that as a sustainable management practice because you're meeting the environmental criteria, 5 health and safety, you're helping the neighbourhood and the locality under social 3, and obviously it's an economic benefit. So this hopefully shows you some very simple processes. You could actually map those against Surf UK indicators, and it helps you as a business demonstrate how you are being more sustainable. So we've gone through and we've got lots and lots of sustainable management practices. These aren't fixed. You can add to them, you can take them away, say that's not applicable, but hopefully it gets you to start thinking about some of the processes and procedures you carry out on site or as your everyday businesses. You think, oh, right, okay, I hadn't thought about that from a sustainability perspective. So a few more very quick ones. These are going to be within the report. Consider opportunities for supporting STEM. For example, that helps on obviously employment, capital. You may not see these in great detail. It helps with neighborhoods and localities because you're starting to bring in that side of things. You're improving ethics and equity by improving STEM knowledge base. If you have the minimize your vehicle miles as a business, obviously you do that. Most companies are doing that at the moment, obviously lockdown, excluding lockdown. But if you are minimizing vehicle miles, that has an improvement on your workforce, and that meets your social 1 indicator. It improves obviously the environment from the air perspective. It improves neighborhoods and localities because you're not driving so much, and obviously you're using less resources. So that by minimizing just your vehicle movements, you're meeting those 4 indicator headlines. So as a business, you can map a lot of your processes you do against the indicators, and hopefully this is what's helping you understand this. So again, using cleaner fuels, these are the different indicators that we think by using cleaner fuels, these are the headline indicators you're meeting. Again, considering using alternative energy sources for powering some of your subsidiary equipment. Again, these are the 4 indicators you're meeting. What we've tried to do is we have mapped these. Again, you can't see this. This will come out as a spreadsheet. It will be sortable and searchable depending on the project activity. So we have mapped it against LCRM, so the project activity. You've got the procurement side, you've got site investigation, risk assessment, site investigation, you've got your options appraisal, remediation strategy, and verification. So you'll see under each of these, we've got lots and lots. There's 184 different SMPs, and these are for you to encourage you to add more. There will be certain things that we've not thought of, but these are just a starting point. And what we've done is you can map them against each of the indicators. So the nice thing about this, as a business, as a project, you can do it on a project specific basis or a business specific basis, but some companies would use this on each project, and then you can actually identify which of your indicators are applicable for a project. And the way the spreadsheet is made is you can identify what the project is and you can write it down, and so then you fix that and you can say, okay, we're using these indicators, and then you can say, did we use these or did we not, and you can give some justification. So again, it helps you as a business start mapping some of your activities and say, well, why did we think we were going to use that, but actually we didn't? And you may change your method and processes to reach that. So this will be available in the summer, or as soon as it's come back from the reviewers, but that's where it is at the moment. So it is a real whistle-stop tour. They are the key resources that we have available that I would actively encourage you to visit. Everything has been built from the framework, and from the framework you've then got more simple animation, you've got a more simple debunking the myths, and then you've got the framework, then you've got SR1, SR2, and then you've got, from that you've got, and then you've got the sustainable management practices that will be helping you go forward. What I just wanted to say to you, that's where your animation is. The SR1 and SR2 report and appendices is here. Then you've got the SMP report and spreadsheet. That's the old one, but that's where the new one will sit as well. The Tier 1 assessment spreadsheet is there. Debunking the myths paper is there, and the framework is there. As I mentioned, Surf UK is part of a network, an international network. Surf UK was the first in the world to publish a framework, which is now obviously signposted through the ISO standard. We have got all of these different surfs across the globe now, and we coordinate 3 times a year to identify what we're doing and sharing resources. And all the guidance is now available and is signposted globally as well. So thank you very much. Hopefully I did get a message saying that the internet was a bit unstable, but hopefully I came through okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. That was really great. It's really useful to have such a comprehensive overview of the different resources available from Surf UK. So that was really useful. Thank you. If anyone does have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. I just wondered quickly if I could ask one, Nicola. So since the publication in 2014, in your experience, has there been a big take up of more sustainable remediation practice, or is there a way of knowing whether how these tools are being used?
Certainly globally it has. I would say there have been a number of papers that are published on the website about how it has been used, I say in anger, internationally, because people are referencing the work. Within the UK, I would say we are always looking for case studies. There are some case studies on the website, but we do understand that people are using them. But we don't know, other than now LCRM being published in October last year, that's now signposting very strongly to Surf UK, and lots of other resources from the Environment Agency and from government websites signpost to the resources. So we have to assume that people are starting to use it, to be honest.
Definitely. Yeah, I think being referenced by the government and in the ISO standard as well is really, really big. And I can only encourage our members to really look at this. It's really important, no matter what you're doing, but especially if you're looking to become chartered. So I think really thinking about sustainability, and like you said, from the outset of a project is really important as well.
Yeah, I think it's growing in thought. A lot of the reason we've been developing more and more resources is to try and hopefully, some people think it's too complicated. We can't do it because it costs too much. It's an add-on. What we're trying to demonstrate is actually, now you've got the framework that came out in 2010, but you've got the sustainable management practices. They're really simple processes you are doing all the time, every day. People are now having to demonstrate to their clients that they are actually being more sustainable. You're having to do that as part of your planning process. If you're going to do a planning development, you need to demonstrate that you are being sustainable. These are the tools now you can actually use to do that. So hopefully that's now helping people. Also, 2010 was a long time ago. There's a lot of people who've joined the industry since then. And what we forget is people don't always know where to go to get those resources. So what we're trying to do is make people aware of these new resources that have been updated in line with government guidelines.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Nicola. We've got a couple of questions coming in from attendees now as well, so I'll try and get through a bit of those before we run out of time. One attendee has asked, if I wanted to complete a remediation options appraisal between groundwater technologies, could I use SURF to create a comparison?
Yes, definitely. It's soil and groundwater. Yes, use a qualitative assessment. Use the SR1, the qualitative assessment tool.
Perfect, thank you. And after the update to the sustainable the SMPs to align with LQRM. What's next for Surf UK?
Good point. We're definitely not going to update the framework because everything has been linked to that. I'm not sure at the moment. We're open to ideas if people feel that they need more resources. What we would probably do is spend some time promoting and trying to encourage people to let us know examples. What we do want is case studies. If people are using different some of the tools and how they're adapting them, because none of the things that we have produced are set in stone. The only things, the SMPs, they're there for you to play with and think, oh, actually, I think this could be added to it. All of those sort of things, we want people to sort of feed back to us and say, well, we've adapted it this way, and we've documented it here. So it's that sort of thing, trying to encourage people to share good practice, and obviously Surf UK can publish those things on its website. So it's really important that people use things and adapt them for their purposes.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I would encourage any of our members listening today who have put any of these principles into practice to definitely get in touch and feedback. Getting lots of good messages. Thank you for your presentation. And another question here is, what is the experience of having sustainability principles being assimilated by regulatory bodies? Is it possible that regulations become a constraint to sustainable remediation?
In the UK, it's not a constraint, it's actively encouraged. In all, so LCRM and GP3, all of the regulations through or guidance through the Environment Agency is very much in a balanced decision making. You talk about cost benefit analysis, all of these sort of things are through the Environment Agency, and Surf UK has hooked onto those messages. So I don't think it's a constraint. There can be constraints in other jurisdictions. So for example, we're in the US, they haven't involved their regulator within their Surf US group initially. So their regulator was a little bit skeptical and said, well, you're trying to actually do less remediation. So they've had to do a lot of learning with their regulator, whereas our regulator, I would say, is well, certainly the Environment Agency, who we've involved from the outset, has been incredibly supportive, and it is very much on a on par with everything they've said.
That's really good to hear. Thank you. Has the SURF framework ever been used to demonstrate that there is no need to return a permitted site to baseline on the grounds of a lack of sustainability and the relevant remediation technologies?
Can you say that one again? Sorry.
Of course, yeah. Has the SURF framework ever been used to demonstrate that there is no need to return a permitted site to baseline on the grounds of a lack of sustainability and the relevant remediation technologies? They mentioned this as something raised specifically in the current permitting regulations.
I don't know is the answer to that. Certainly, it's actively encouraged. The decision-making process starting on a qualitative assessment, going to a quantitative. There can be a cost benefit, it can be a cost benefit analysis not to actually do the remediation, or to keep cleaning it up, because actually it's not cost effective in a it's not sustainable to keep remediating. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but I don't actually know. If that person wants to drop me an email, I can try and get an answer for them, but I don't know off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
Perfect, thanks, Nicola. And just we only have time for one more, I'm afraid, so sorry if I didn't make it to your question today, and thank you for your engagement and questions. That's really great. So you have requested case studies about how the SURF tools have been used, but are you interested in receiving and sharing case studies in the use of innovative sustainable remediation technologies being promoted by remediation contractors in the UK?
If they're demonstrating how they're being, what would be useful is to see how they're demonstrating they are sustainable. Any new technology to to say how they're being sustainable, but what are they comparing them to and how they're comparing them, in making sure it's in an open, transparent way. We're always interested in that. So yes, but it's just quite interesting to understand how they're actually demonstrating that their technology is more sustainable than maybe another technology.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nicola. It's been really great to have you on today. That's it from us today. Thank you all for logging in. I hope that you found that beneficial and informative. Don't forget to record your attendance on the IES CPD tool. As I mentioned, this webinar has been recorded and will be made available on the IES YouTube channel. Just to let you know that the next IES webinar, which is going to be part of our new series exploring nature-based solutions, will be on the 28th of April, and we'll be looking at the role of nature-based solutions in a just transition. Again, this is free to attend, so please do just visit our website if you'd like to register. Thank you once again to our speaker, Nicola Harries, and to all of you for attending. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.